Welcome to Innovation Pathways Workshop Series, Designing High Quality Pathway Programs. We want to ask you, as we give everyone an opportunity to trickle in, if you would, in the chat, share your name, as well as your school, your district, or organization. And while you're doing that, we also would like to ask you to update your name. If you could use the feature in your Zoom window to make sure that everyone here, not just us, but all of your colleagues joining this morning can see your first and last name. And then we'd ask you to add your district as well, along with your name, so that when we're in breakout rooms, each of you can begin to get acquainted with each other. So just giving everyone a couple of minutes to both update their names and fill in the chat. So it looks like we have a pretty full group today. There's just 4 or 5 of us joining you from our side, which means there's over 40 of you joining this morning. So it's great to see everyone here. Next, I'd like to introduce the team. So you see all of us here on the screen. Some of you have maybe already met some of us, or this might be your first time. Jennifer Guakin joins us from DESE, and I'm not sure if she's here yet, but I'm sure she'll come soon. Callie Cornell is with us also this morning. She's our lead on the Innovation Pathways work with CCE. Then you have myself, I'm Dawn Shera-Corin. I'm one of the senior associates at CCE. We have Laura Toda joining us this morning as well as a senior associate and helping to guide some of the small group discussions and the agenda, along with Callie and I this morning. And then we have our wonderful Allison Plez, who is our project manager and makes sure that everything is together in terms of our technical features and just working us through the day with breakout rooms and things of that sort. So welcome again, everyone. We're excited to greet you this morning. Really quickly, we'd like to share a little bit about the Center for Collaborative Education and our role with you as a part of Innovation Pathways. CCE's mission remains as a goal towards student success and partnering with schools, districts, and their communities to increase voice and ownership, equity and opportunities with an eye on reducing systemic racism and transforming schools, again, always with an eye on student success. CCE's role with Innovation Pathways is as a technical assistant in supporting the Pathways Partnership. And we want to mention now, and we'll mention again later in our session today, that we welcome you to join us for the webinars, the workshops, the different forums and spotlight programs that we'll be featuring during the course of the year, as well as professional learning communities that we'll begin to organize in the coming weeks for opportunities for you to join and again, connect with each other. We have 3 outcomes for today that we hope to reach: becoming familiar with the Innovations Pathway tools and the support that we can offer you to design a successful program. We hope to engage in a collaborative design and problem-solving process with you that will benefit you in a couple of ways, both sharing challenges and successes you might have, as well as being able to gain insight from your peers around challenges or successes that you might be experiencing during this process and in designing your programs. Our last hope for outcomes today is to build connections across the community. So again, we'll continue to find ways for you to connect through name sharing, small breakout rooms, and opportunities to talk with each other. Our agenda will be this welcoming. Shortly, we'll move into an opportunity for connections in small groups and breakout rooms. We'll come back and you'll learn a little bit about the Innovation Pathways design process and tools again. And then we'll move into 3 different breakout discussions. There'll be a breakout for those of you that are in the application process. And then there will be 2 additional breakout rooms where you'll have an opportunity to choose a topic based on our discussions earlier in the day. And in those breakout rooms, we hope to have a solid 30 minutes and an opportunity to talk with each other and spend some time sharing. We'll come back and have a quick Q&A, open discussion, and then we'll close. So our community agreements that we are sharing on the screen, and Callie is sharing slides with us this morning. So her and I are tag teaming here as we move along through the process. But these are our community agreements. We'll share these with you each time that we come together. And I won't read them all, but I do want to draw your attention to 3 of them that stand out for me. And I'll just speak to those briefly. While at the same time, I want to encourage you to think about one that you really want to work towards in your time together with us and during these sessions. So the 3 I had in mind was 1, 5, and 8. This idea of assuming best intentions is a sort of standard protocol that we all always think of. And in the effort to think about equity and anti-racism, we also want to encourage that we always understand our impact. So while we assume best intentions of each other and we expect others to assume best intentions of us, we have to also take responsibility for our impact. And that goes not only for us here, but we encourage you to think about these community agreements everywhere. They work wonderfully in our classrooms, in our schools, in our districts. Number 5 just speaks to trusting the process. We work really hard to create a process that is fruitful to you, that can be substantive and allow you to have an opportunity to have equity of voice. And so the protocols really allow us to do that. And it's always important to remember to trust the process. And then that last one, to remember to strive for both and thinking. No situation needs to be an either or situation. Everything can have multiple perspectives. And so where we might not agree, we can remember that there's always 2 ways, if not more, but at least a both and perspective that's important to take into consideration in different situations. So next we will just take a moment, to take a look at this cartoon here, this comic, and I just want to remind us before we go any further that we are not in ordinary times. If anything, the current crisis has reminded us what kinds of learning can be done remotely and which cannot. There is something inherently awkward in talking about the kind of learning that so essentially relies on live engagement and hands-on experiences, while we all are unable even to talk about it in person. That said, our hope is that what we learn together today will be able to have an impact when we are able to return to normalcy, whatever that might be, and when we are able to be back in person. So with that said, we want to move into a connections opportunity this morning, where my voice will fall to the background and you guys will have an opportunity to begin to meet and greet each other and have some conversation. We are going to share a quick video, a student video. And in this video, what we want you to do while watching the video is to pay attention to a phrase or a sentence from a student that stands out for you. Pay attention to something that resonates and then think about why that particular statement that a student makes during the video resonates with you. Laura has just dropped that prompt into the chat. And we have one more thing we want to share before we move into the video. Callie's going to give us a quick preview of using Jamboard. We know that teachers are using Jamboard a lot in the classrooms, but we want to just make sure that everyone here has a good idea about using the Jamboard. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Callie, momentarily to share the Jamboard with everyone and how it works.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dawn. And good morning, everyone. So many of you, I think, might be already familiar with Jamboard, but we wanted to, it's a new technology that we're trying out within this space. And so we wanted to give a quick tutorial. And so if you'll forgive me for a moment while I exchange screens, what you'll see, Laura has shared a link in the chat. And when you click on that link, that will open up a Google-based Jamboard. And so this is what you should see when you open up that board. It's sort of essentially like a virtual whiteboard. So we put the title and what the directions are for this right there within the Jamboard. And then how you add to it, you'll see a navigation bar over on the left-hand side over here. If you click on the little sticky note icon, it'll pop up for you a window, and you can type away all your thoughts right in there and then hit save. And what that will do, and then you can click out cancel the sticky note, will add your thoughts right here. And you're able to move that sticky note around. You can give it a different color. You can edit your text, all sorts of things. And so that's the feature, that sticky note feature that we will be using this morning. It's really easy, simple to use. It sort of takes just a few moments to orient yourself. But so we'll try this for this activity, and we're going to try it again for another activity a bit later. So this is our sort of like practice round. If you have any difficulties with it, flag us in the chat, let us know, and we can help troubleshoot while it's happening. So I'm going to delete my fake typing there and then head back to the student video to play. Donna, are we ready for the video?
I think we are. Yes.
I went into this program my freshman year knowing that I ultimately wanted to become a medical doctor, but I had no clue of what specialty or where to start in my educational journey. So through workshops and guest speakers that the program offers to the students, I've been able to explore and compare the varying career paths and have a direction towards what I want to do post-high school graduation.
I always knew I wanted to go to college for like robotic engineering or something, but I didn't have a good grasp of the kind of job or place I'd want to work after college. And after my internship, I'm probably going to apply to work at FTL Lab since it was a great experience and I'm comfortable with the people there. The Pathways has also given me a lot of chances to do unique classes I wouldn't have had the chance to do or would have even thought to do, like a programming class, networking.
Through the pathway, I've thankfully gotten the opportunity to meet some of the most driven and ambitious people I know as well. One of my friends from the class is 15 and she's in the process of starting her own clothing brand. And another person from the class just recently got a scholarship for an out-of-state business program, which I think is very incredible. We also had meaningful assignments that connected to the real world.
All right, so you should receive a prompt shortly. There it is from Allison to be able to go into the breakout rooms. We want to, again, ask you to go ahead and populate the Jamboards while you're in there, and then take a few minutes to talk with the folks in your breakout room, introduce yourselves.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Not yet.
Yes, you are. I'm so sorry. We're not in breakout rooms.
Breakout spaces. No breakout spaces at this point. Just taking just a moment to think about what you heard in the video and put that into the Jamboard.
Yes, I am sorry, everyone. I'm moving us ahead in the agenda and it's not where we're at yet. We will go into breakout rooms following this section of our agenda. Sorry about that, Allison. So here we're just going to take a few minutes to both get our comments up and also see what your colleagues are sharing on the Jamboard.
Awesome. And I want to acknowledge that Jennifer Watkin, the Innovation Pathways lead from DESE, has joined us. Jennifer, I don't know if you want to say a few words to say hello or react to anything you're seeing on the Jamboard.
Yeah, well, I'm so thrilled to see many of you here. Some faces I'm familiar with and others maybe not yet, but I'm glad you were able to make it. I was actually late because I was talking money with people, money specifically for Innovation Pathways. So had a good reason for being late if that can count. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure. And then Kelsey, we're actually not in a breakout room now, so you're where you need to be.
Perfect. So this is awesome. Thanks so much for sharing thoughts here. We'll keep this open. You can continue to reflecting and reading other folks' comments on the Jamboard, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move us on. I think, Don, have a couple more slides to introduce before we jump into our breakout spaces, which we're excited to get you into.
Yes, thank you, Callie. And again, I apologize, everyone, for moving us ahead too quickly in the agenda today. So just to give you a little bit of the landscape of the Massachusetts Innovation Pathways, we have a couple of slides here that we'll share to give you some background and some context. Just thinking about the MassHire Partnerships and the different pathway sectors. As you can see, we have the 5 different sectors here. I'm sure you are all familiar with all of them. And what you see on the board there are the different numbers of schools that we have that have pathways in those different areas.
And I apologize that you all, we started the day late because of some tech difficulties, and I'm seeing we're missing some slides here. And so we'll make sure to put up, after we had some stats just on our current numbers of innovation pathways in the state. And so I know that we had a tremendous amount of growth last year, a number of designees that joined us. Our impact, we have over 4,000 students across the state who are engaged in innovation pathways this fall and continue to grow every year. And so we'll make sure as we put the saved deck on our website so that you can access it later along with the recording to include all of those stats within here. And sorry for that tech mix up this morning on the slides.
So moving us ahead, I'll pass it over to you now, Callie.
That's right. Yeah, thanks,
Awesome.
Don. And thanks everyone for bearing with us. We know that these things happen, right? And part of our sort of message around the Zoom fatigue and the Zoom meeting cartoon this morning was that we have to be flexible, and these things happen when we're all in a virtual space. So we hear over and over again from you all that the time spent with your peers and your colleagues from other schools is some of the most valuable time that we can provide in these technical assistance spaces. And so in that spirit, we really wanted to open up the workshop today with an opportunity for you to have some semi-structured conversations with colleagues across the network. So in just a moment, we're going to create some random breakout groupings, and you'll have about 12 minutes in those small groups. And what we'd really like you to focus on your conversations are upcoming priorities. And so we encourage you to sort of step into a round robin style conversation where everyone gets a chance to answer the first set of questions, pause for think time, and then give everyone a chance to answer the second round of questions. So we have a Jamboard link again, and so my colleagues will put that in the chat, and we've included these directions in the Jamboard so that when this screen goes away, once you're in breakout rooms, you'll have those directions there. But once you're in your groups, say hello, share your name, and then share sort of where you are in terms of your pathway work. Are you applying for the first time? Are you in your first year of implementation? Are you revamping parts of your program? So what's on the plate or your plate for you this year? And then share 1 or 2 priorities in your pathway this fall. What are your immediate priorities coming up? And then give everyone sort of a moment of think time, 60 to 90 seconds, really quick, and then start sort of another round robin of conversation within your group to think about what challenges are you facing? So what's keeping you up at night? Like, what do you wake up in the middle of the night or sort of stay awake in bed at night thinking about that you wish you could sort of had a group of colleagues to figure this out with, or you could solve some challenges around, and then share and discuss those answers within your small group. Make sure that this second part, these challenges pieces, are what you document within the Jamboard. So the first part, that's a conversation for you all in your small group, but the second part around the challenges, we'd really like you to put those in the Jamboard and sort of make a note. It doesn't have to be your full conversation, but just make note about the themes and the topics that came up. And I'll give you a hint that we'll use these topics and themes to sort of help organize our breakout spaces again later in the workshop. So it's important to record the pieces here. And so we'll open up the breakout rooms in just a moment. Any questions about the breakout rooms or directions for this part? I'm seeing some head nods from a few people.
And I'm
right.
seeing a bunch of people in the Jamboard, Callie, so I think they're ready.
Great. Excellent. Perfect. So Allison, we're ready to open up breakout rooms. You'll have about 10 to 12 minutes in these breakout spaces, and then we'll bring you back to the full group. Enjoy your conversations. So welcome back, everyone. We hope that your time in your small breakout spaces was fruitful and you got a chance to meet new people and talk about what's happening in your pathway programs this year. I know that we had a number of breakout spaces and only a few stickies here, and so I'd encourage sort of 1 or 2 folks from your breakout room to just jot down sort of themes. Doesn't have to be anything long, just a couple of sentences or even just a topic name, so that we can use this information to help to put together some breakout spaces later in our workshop. Jennifer, I'm curious if you have any reactions to what you're seeing here, or it doesn't have to be anything sort of earth-shattering or profound, but just any reactions or something you'd want to sort of attend to within what you're seeing in the Jamboard.
Sure. The one that stood out to me was the difficulty of finding internship sites. So that's something that we really want to encourage you to lean on your MassHire boards to help with. And I think for those of you who heard me earlier, I was late to the meeting because I was in a funding conversation, but I'm hopeful that we will have additional funding. Of course, like put all that out into the atmosphere or whatever, but additional funding to help with that component, certainly for the programs that are a little further along and they're at the point of needing the internship sites for students. But I'm also, let's see, all of these are good comments. Of course, team approach is critical. And this is something that I know that we've talked about as a group, the CCE colleagues and I, is the fact that so many of you have come to us with some colleagues who are ready to roll up their sleeves. So knowing that you have people who are in it with you is critical. And then I'm looking at the planning grant comment. See, don't have the outcome of the grant application. So maybe this is, I don't know if that comment is from someone who is jumping in now and will be applying for a planning grant in the spring. So maybe you can reach out to me afterwards about your situation.
Excellent. Yeah, so keep those coming if you've not had a chance to put them in there, and you can play with the sizes and the text size and all of that, so we can fit everyone's comments in along the way. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us along. And we have sort of several tools and resources and materials that we'd like to share with you that we believe sort of no matter where you are in your design and implementation process might be helpful. And so, of course, it's not a requirement at all that you use any or all of these tools, but we offer them as a support to your thinking, your designing, and your planning across innovation pathways, no matter where you are in the process, to just applying to having been implementing for a few years. So these should all be very familiar to your innovation pathways guiding principles. And so we won't go into any deep detail about the guiding principles today. We're sort of making the assumption that those who join this workshop are familiar with these guiding principles and the core characteristics of innovation pathways. If you are a new applicant, as we head into breakout sessions again later in the workshop, we'll have one specifically for those who are applying for Part A. We'll talk a little bit more deeply about these and sort of have some room for questions around them. So if you're not certain about them, no fear, we'll have time to talk about them. But these 5 guiding principles are the foundation for all pathway programs, and many of the tools and the resources that we're going to share with you today are organized by guiding principle. For those who have been with us for a while, we might sound like a broken record, but the Innovation Pathways Toolkit is always available to you. And we continue to add resources to it and refine what's in there over time. And so it includes processes, tools, materials, examples, all related to the essential components of pathway program design. And so these processes, tools, and resources within the toolkit are certainly not exhaustive. We don't have everything under the sun, nor is it intended that Innovation Pathways design and development teams necessarily make use of every single resource shared within the toolkit, but rather we offer them as or they're really intended to support a variety of design, development, and implementation needs in a way that's customizable according to your school and your district's particular context and needs. And so the toolkit is made up of 4 parts. And so I believe one of my colleagues has shared a link to the toolkit within the chat. And so just to sort of orient you to what's here, section 1 provides some introductory information from DESE and from CCE. Section 2 includes resources that are authored and released by DESE to support your planning and design of pathway elements around and is organized around the core characteristics. And these include resources like the Massachusetts Labor Market Blueprints. It includes the Model Internship Guide. It has MyCap information, guides, and tools. And so that's a really useful sort of section of the toolkit. Section 3 of the toolkit, we have a recommended 4-part design process with accompanying tools sort of under each part of that particular design process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then section 4 includes resources, examples, and tools related to specific topics. So for example, you might be just looking for resources around capstones or course descriptions or advising supports or work-based learning. So you can head right into section 4, click on that topic, and it will bring you to a list of resources we have related to that particular topic. And that toolkit can be accessed from the Innovation Pathways Technical Assistance website, which is this tiny URL here on the screen. And I don't have the chat open, but I think one at the moment, but I think one of my colleagues dropped that link in the chat. So this is our 4-part design process, which again is intended to help guide school teams through a process of pathway development. And so although it's sort of listed here in terms of phases and the steps are numbered, they're rarely approached in chronological order, and often multiple steps are occurring at the same time, or you're sort of just focused on one step. And sometimes you have to retrace those steps and sort of go through the process or sort of use some tools multiple times over the course of your pathway planning and over the course of implementation to be successful. And so we sort of offer them here as just a logical reference for teams who are engaging in design and development. And in particular, sort of this designing and development phase, so what we have listed as phase number 3, which is where we imagine sort of the tools that are in there might be helpful to you at this point in the school year. Under the designing and planning phase, there are resources for your teams, or whether you're applying for a new pathway program or you're examining what's working, what needs improvement to an existing program. There are some tools in there that might be helpful. We wanted to just highlight that section for you. We have a number of tools that we want to talk through. And so I know this is hard to see and you don't need to be able to read what's on the screen. They're just sort of images to sort of talk through. But as we talk through them, we'll share links to each of these resources. There's a whole lot in the toolkit. And as I mentioned before, it continues to grow over time as we add more. But we wanted to point out sort of a few specific resources and tools that we think might be helpful to you at this moment in time, at this sort of part of the school year, and give you a chance to sort of read through those tools and think about how they might be useful within your context. Excuse me. So I'm going to give a sort of very brief overview of each of these resources and want to acknowledge that the purpose is not to dive deep here. We really just want to share these resources so that you know how they might be used and to let you know that they exist, right? Just point them out that they're out there in the ether for you to exist, or not out there in the ether, on the toolkit. We'll show you where to access them. And so while I'm sharing an overview of each, my colleagues will be sharing a link in the chat to a Google Doc that has direct links to each of these documents and a description of the resource. So We are calling it the resource guide for today. So this will have a link to each of the resources that we talk through. So I would encourage you to open that Google Doc resource guide, keep it open. We'll come back to that and sort of do some interacting with it in just a moment. And then sort of one quick note again, before I start talking through each of these tools. In many of the tools, I'll talk about how it can support the design of a pathway. And when we talk about this, it's not just that for those who are creating new pathways, it's also meant to support design thinking as a continuous improvement process. So including for those who have pathways in place for several years, as you're thinking about improvement, making changes, revamping sections, that's what we mean when we talk about design. So when we use the word design, not just talking about beginning planning, but really talking about design as an iterative process. So the first tool that we want to talk through is the reflection tool. So this particular tool we think might be helpful for planning teams and program coordinators who are designing and seeking to improve their pathway programs. And really would find this tool, reflection tool, valuable in considering ways to establish and strengthen their pathways with students at the center. So it's organized around the 5 guiding principles and contains questions that really lead to critical reflection and problem solving that build on a commitment to changing learning for students. And so these reflection questions are intended to spark conversation. Again, not exhaustive, but really intended to spark conversations among your leadership or your design teams, among the adults, and generate new questions that apply to your particular school context or district context. And so you might consider using this tool at any stage in the pathway development process in order to review your program with a really critical eye. On a similar vein about reviewing with a critical eye, we have a self-assessment tool, and the site-based self-assessment tool was created to allow planning teams to self-evaluate where you are in your program design. So it's also organized by the 5 guiding principles. There's a theme here. And under each guiding principle, the tool really asks you to self-assess where you feel like you are. Are you initiating in this practice? Is it developing? Have you established this? Is it firmly in place and it's really in the sustaining this practice? It provides short descriptions under each sort of rating for each indicator, and then so that you can use it as a benchmark for your own self-assessment, and provides a space for you to list evidence of your ratings, detail any key challenges, propose next steps, they're all within there. And really to be used as a baseline and then a periodic assessment to keep track of your progress and improvement over time. So this is not at all meant to be evaluative, not meant to be shared outside of your school and design team, but rather meant to provide a structured tool for conversation around how implementation of your pathway is going. And so we've seen this tool, the self-assessment tool, used in a number of different ways. And we would recommend using this with your team where you either sort of each evaluate differently and then come together as a team to compare results and have a conversation, or sort of go through the self-ratings as a team together to come to some consensus around where you are in your self-assessment ratings. I'm going to pause for a moment. I've been doing a lot of talking. So to my colleagues, are there any questions in the chat here before we move on to talking about the next 3 tools? Seeing some head shakes.
I think we're good.
Okay. So as questions come up, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And I promise this is the longest length of time that we'll be talking in the whole session. We'll wrap up and then get you talking to one another. So the next tool we want to just make you aware of are the Building Inclusive Teams tool. And this resource is a brief tool to help you think about building a team of ambassadors to share this work and share a mission and a vision. Oftentimes, when we talk to folks, particularly at the beginning of the planning process, they feel like they're an island, right? They're thinking about, they're designing, they're planning all on their own or with a very small group. And so we hope that this tool might provide some structure to thinking about how to build out your team, build those ambassadors, build those advocates within your school and your community for this pathways work. And so it asks you to consider the key stakeholder groups in your community or within your school. Think about the identities and the backgrounds of the community that should be included to make sure you have diversity of voice within the planning, the design, and development process of your pathway programs. Another sort of team thinking tool is the individual and group learning plan, another tool designed to support school teams in engaging in collaborative design and individual learning, sort of with the goal of building a shared capacity to lead systems change. So oftentimes we know that pathways are not just sort of one program within a school that sort of sits on its own, but are connected to how we think about serving students better, more equitable learning opportunities for students within your school and within your district. And so this tool can help you sort of build a unified vision and determine what collective learning goals you all have for your pathway program. This can be particularly helpful as you plan to brainstorm new or persistent challenges to implementing pathways. And then sort of the final tool to highlight here is the design thinking mini hack. And so another resource to support problem solving, sort of solutionizing within a school design team. And so this protocol can support a school team in designing pathway that's rooted in the 5 guiding principles by providing opportunities to quickly ideate and problem solve around a particular challenge or problem of practice. If you were with us in March of 2020, which seems like an eons ago, it was our last and our only in-person workshop that we were able to have. We used this design mini hack tool in the afternoon session to engage in quick problem solving rounds using design thinking principles. And so if you're with us then, this might be familiar, but sort of a quick tool to sort of pick up and be able to use within conversations in school design teams. And then quickly, finally wanted to point out sort of the whole, we talked about this earlier, but the second section of the toolkit. So that is also linked within that resource guide, that Google Doc that we shared. And this is the place where we have specific resources from DESE to support your planning and design. So again, this includes like labor market blueprints, model internship guide, lots of other pieces, some resources around MyCap are included within that second section, the core design tools in the toolkit. So I've just talked a lot of you. So what we'd like to do is to give you a moment to digest some of these and review some of these resources on your own, to have some dedicated time. And so what we'll ask you to do is we'll put a timer on, we'll ask you to individually review these tools that are linked within the resource guide Google Doc. And you're welcome to look through any of the ones that you want, but we would really recommend choosing 1 or 2 to review. Take a look through, familiarize yourself with that particular resource, and consider a need that you have related to innovation pathways at the moment, your pathway program. So for example, if you're bringing new team members on board, what tool might be most helpful to you in this moment, and why is that? Or if you're really focused on retaining students, what tool might be helpful? Or another example, if you're really focused on external partnerships and building those up and sustaining them this year, what tool might be helpful and why? And so we offer these examples as a lens in which you might review some of these resources and consider thinking about sort of which ones are helpful, how you might use them within your context. And of course, they're all meant to be applicable and adapted to your local school context and needs. So I'm going to stop chattering. I'm going to give you well, let's say 5 minutes, so you can feel free to turn off your camera and stay muted and take a look at these resources. We'll come back in a few minutes, and sort of as just a heads up, in a few minutes, I'll just ask anyone who is willing to share some of their reflections, some of the things that they were thinking about, what came up for them as they reviewed the tools. So put 5 minutes on the clock. You have to individually review, and we'll come back in a few minutes. Give a 2-minute warning. We'll have about another 2 minutes to do some individual review. All right, so I'll ask you to sort of wrap up the last few sentences you're reading and reviewing, and we'll come back together. All right, so not required, but wondering if anyone would want to come off mute and share with the group sort of what they reviewed and how they might think about how they're thinking about using it within their own school or district context. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And you can also feel free to drop any of your reactions right in the chat.
Callie, I don't mind sharing. One of the ones that I was looking at was the mini hack tool. Yeah, I was saying in our breakout session, this is technically our second year designation, but having our first year during COVID, where we kind of had all these plans and then the world shut, everything shut down. And now I feel like we're back to ground zero while we're supposed to be in year 2. So I feel like we're really looking at just so much this year, trying to kind of find some new partnerships of partners who have pulled out and kind of all that stuff. And it's just such a small little team of us who just stare at it all the time. That mini hack tool, I feel like might be a really nice way to maybe get a larger group to look at the problem that we're looking at and maybe just really start generating ideas that we're not seeing, because I just, just a lot of work to do this year and a small team always trying to do the same work, and maybe bringing in some new people and using that exercise might help us think outside the box a little bit. So that was helpful for me to kind of take some time to look at. So
awesome. Thanks, Melissa. I love that. This should write this notion of we get stuck in our own little teams and our way of thinking, right? And this might be an opportunity to bring in some new voices and do some problem solving and thinking outside of the box that sometimes, we're running so quickly on getting through the to-do list and all the task lists that we don't pull back to do that. And so hopefully that tool can help spark some of those conversations. Thanks so much. Curious to hear from anyone else.
I'll go if there's no other victims. That was a joke. I know it's being recorded. So I looked at the reflection tool. So over at West Springfield, we're more or less at the point where we're trying to bolster our programs. Going along with what was just said, we did pretty much have to restart our IP programs from ground zero. However, it was really a matter of retaining those kids and really trying to grow the program to scale is what I was focusing on during, the pandemic. Really looking at a time to reflect At this point, we're in the middle of introducing a new advisory committee for the IP program. So using that reflection tool will pretty much guide our conversations, because it's all exciting that I'm the one who oversees the majority of the program, or I'm the one overseeing it. But it's really helpful to have a committee that can give me perspective from the outside that I don't see. So we are we have an advisory committee that actually has our first meeting today, and we have stakeholders from all different areas. So I highly recommend that. As everyone's going through the planning process, it's definitely a benefit to a program to have oversight.
Awesome. Thanks, Wes. Really appreciate that perspective. And again, sort of this notion that some of these schools can help pull you out of your sort of existing thinking, sort of get new ideas, get diversity of voice, and sort of widen that group of ambassadors or folks who are carrying that vision and carrying that, the value of pathway programs within your school. So awesome to hear. Thanks, Wes. Anyone else? I'll take one more if someone's interested in chiming in. All right. Hearing none, we'll move on. But thanks for that. Really appreciate that, Melissa and Wes. And I'm going to kick it over to Laura to introduce us into our next section.
Thank you, Callie. So we are going to provide a second opportunity for breakouts today. I want to preface this by saying that for many of you, this will be the first of numerous opportunities throughout the course of this year to address problems of practice, challenges that you're facing in innovation pathways, planning and implementation. So this is just going to be a pretty quick, maybe about 30-minute preview into that type of exercise that we'll engage in as a community, again, many times throughout the year. So we are going to operate 3 concurrent breakout spaces. The first breakout is technically going to stay in the main space, so you're not going to move to a breakout room. But this space is designed for new applicants who are joining us today. It's going to be an overview of the Part A application and an opportunity for questions to be answered by Callie and Jennifer. They're going to be sort of the facilitators in that space to support you through any questions you might have about the application process. So if you are representing a new applicant space, we invite you to join that breakout room. Again, you're going to do so by not doing anything. So you have sort of the easiest lift right now. You're just going to stay right here in this main room. The second and third breakouts, which are actually going to go to separate spaces, are designed for those of you who are coming from existing designation sites. And so we have identified 2 sort of recurring problems of practice that surfaced from that Jamboard brainstorm that you did earlier. That's our way of showing you we're committed to listening to what you're saying and giving you opportunities to discuss challenges you're facing. And so there are going to be 2 different, you're going to have choice here, the 2 different topics that are going to be addressed in those breakouts. The first is going to be around supporting students to succeed in advanced coursework, the requirement for innovation pathways. That breakout room, when we show you the options, is going to be titled Advanced Coursework. And the second option is going to be around identifying and scheduling internships within the school's master schedule. And that room is going to be titled Accessing and Scheduling Internships. We want to emphasize that for those of you who are existing designees going to the problem of practice breakout rooms, we want you to consider this a time or an opportunity for either give or get, or a combination of both. So you're welcome to join a room where you're like, wow, that really resonates as a challenge I'm facing right now. But we also invite you to consider joining a room if you say, I spent a lot of time working on that problem last year, and I think I have some ideas that might be helpful to my peers here. So you're welcome to join a room where you're looking to get something out of it. And we also equally encourage you to join a space where you think you can contribute something to your peers who might be currently facing that challenge. All right. So one more time for our new applicants, you're going to stay right here. For our existing designees, you're going to be moving to breakout spaces. And so in order to do that, We are offering this as a self-select option. So if this is a new feature for you, we have pulled up the slide you see here, provides some instructions for how to navigate to those breakout rooms. So if you have your Zoom minimized because you're multitasking right now, that's totally fine. We understand. But for just a moment, we're going to ask you to extend that screen all the way up. And at the bottom panel in Zoom, you should see that little 4-quadrant button that says breakout rooms. You're going to select that, and you should see the 2 breakout options and a blue button to click join. And so if you see that, we invite you to click the advanced coursework or the accessing and scheduling internships, again, whichever feels more relevant for you today. And you can go on and head to those rooms. If for some reason you're having trouble accessing that self-select feature in Zoom, perfectly fine. Just go ahead and throw in the chat box here which room you'd like to be in, and we're happy to assist you to get into that space. So when you're ready, if you are an existing designee who's going to be moving out of the main room, go ahead and start navigating that way, and we will come back together as a full group in about 30 minutes. Thanks.
We're going to give folks a moment to get where they need to be and get oriented. But for those who are in the application process now, so currently working on your Part A application, you'll stay right here in this room. I'm seeing some folks moving around, so we'll give folks like another 30 seconds or so to get into the right space. And if you're having any trouble, let us know. Pop it in the chat if you need us to assign you to a particular room if you're having trouble or don't see that feature, or it's not, you know, we've been a lot of tech issues this morning, so Zoom might be, and I was told that Mercury's in retrograde, so if that's a thing for you, it is resonating true today. Excellent. So one more reminder that if you are here because you're currently putting together a Part A application. And so if you need any support to get to another space, let us know. We can help get you there. And so again, I'm Callie Cornell. I'm joined by Jennifer Guakin, DESE Innovation Pathways lead. And we have about 30 minutes together. And I'm actually going to put a timer on so that I can make sure that I'm not talking too long. We give plenty of time for Q&A as part of this, but we want to welcome you all who are new applicants or those who are applying for a new pathway this year. We have a bit of information sort of up front to share, and then we'll open the floor to questions that you have. And so Jennifer and I are here in hopes that we can answer all of the questions that you have today, or figure out times where we can reconnect to answer some site-specific questions. So in that vein, sort of earlier in the presentation, I shared like we would come back to these 5 guiding principles and share just a bit more information about them. To some of you, these might seem really familiar, and others might want a bit more information on them. So I'm going to give just a couple sentences about each. And Jennifer would encourage you, if there's something I missed or something you want to add about any of the principles, jump right in.
Sure.
And so as we said earlier, the guiding principles really provide a framework for innovation pathways programs, and all of the programs are rooted within these 5 guiding principles. And the application materials that you'll be asked to complete will be sort of organized by these guiding principles and ask you to speak specifically to the elements within each of these. And so under equitable access, this is really about designing programs that prioritize students who are underrepresented in education enrollment and completion. So thinking about structuring pathways in a way that eliminate barriers to student participation. Under guided academics, this is really thinking about programs that are structured around clear and detailed student academic pathways in terms of coursework, course sequencing, and any experiences that students are having beyond the classroom. And so here we really expect that students are exposed to authentic experiences, thinking about academic rigor and career opportunities that allow them to make informed decisions about the career pathways they want to pursue after high school. Under enhanced supports, this is really thinking about programs demonstrating sufficient wraparound services to promote student success, and includes ways that we both identify and think about addressing all of the potential academic and non-academic challenges for students that are enrolled. Principle number 4 is connection to career. So this is where programs expose students to targeted opportunities intended to lead to careers. And so thinking about those targeted exposures can come in the form of opportunities for workforce and career skills development, career counseling, or work-based learning. And then finally, we have effective partnerships, which requires that there's a formal partnership between the school or district and MassHire, which is your local workforce development board, along with one or more other employee partners. So really there's 3 sort of entities in the mix, right? The school and or district, your local MassHire board, and at least one employer or partner. And so all of the application processes, the planning tools, and other materials are all organized around these guiding principles. But it is sort of worth noting here that though there are common elements to each of the programs, and there are sort of foundations and standards for what we expect to see in pathway programs, every school has different elements based on their context, their connections, their local community assets that really make their programs unique. And so, you know, a healthcare program in Worcester won't look the same as a healthcare program in Barnstable, or sort of an engineering program in Swampscott won't look the same as something, you know, out in like Quebec. And so across the state, those programs, they have the same sort of central tenets, but take on a different flavor, sort of depending on the local context, community assets, and the partnerships that are there. Jennifer, anything to add around the guiding principles before?
Yeah, I actually threw in the chat, and I apologize if that's distracting for folks, but so guided academic principle or pathways, it really requires a coherent scope and sequence of courses, and we can certainly talk about these. But 2 advanced courses are required and 2 technical courses are required. They should be distinct courses, and then the student's experience would culminate in an immersive work-based learning experience, either an internship or a capstone. It's 100 hours in duration.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Perfect.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah, please do.
And Kevin's from North Attleboro.
North Attleboro. When we put this together, we have, of course, we're going to highlight the technical courses kids could choose. In our case, advanced placement courses, their capstone. But the rest of the courses that they're going to pick throughout high school have to meet MassCore and our graduation requirements. So we don't necessarily have to make a list of courses that they must take aside from the technical and AP and the capstone project. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, you don't have to list out your course catalog.
Freedom of choice.
Sure, but we would expect that a student, if I were to ask them or Callie were to ask them, what's your experience in an innovation pathway? Like, how do you know you're part of a pathway? We would expect there to be a strong theme there, and like not have like too many choices for students, if that makes sense. So the sort of the choices that you would give them for your technical courses, you know, maybe not 10 courses, maybe 3 to 4. Just an example.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I would, as an example, sort of how that plays out, right? So we have many districts who sort of say, okay, these first 2 courses, every student in our pathway takes, but then as they sort of get more refined, more exposure, know what they want to do, then maybe there's sort of different options or like tracks that they can choose. So if everyone takes these foundational courses, you know, in IT, right, in software and information software, and then after that, then you get to choose like track 1 or track 2, depending on what you want to do. And so that's sort of how we're seeing that those options play out. Is sort of like typically there's some foundational courses that everyone takes, and then there's some options based on sort of any specialization or interest that students have.
So when we present this in Part A, obviously we're going to show the technical courses, AP courses. What else do you want to, like, so for instance, as freshmen, everybody, we're going to take foundation to say biology. So you want us to point that out to you, even though it's not necessarily strictly part of the IP, it's what a lot of the student body does. Am I saying that right? Does that make sense? Like, what are you looking for in Part A exactly? Aside from those 2 technical, 2 AP, capstone, career immersion type of things, is there any other requirements we must show you
We really want to know about the advanced courses. So in innovation pathways, I just want to say you're mentioning advanced placement. That's one way to fulfill the advanced course requirement. For innovation pathways, it could be dual enrollment if schools have international baccalaureate. Some schools use Project Lead the Way. Just pointing out that there are multiple ways to approach that. But we really are interested, maybe not in like, I mean, maybe like if you were to do, I know this is actually for Part B where we ask for sample schedules, or we might see like a freshman would have their biology course just part of their regular course of studies. But we really want you to focus in on what would make it, make the student's experience unique in the innovation pathways. The courses that would fulfill the innovation pathways requirements.
Okay.
The 2 advanced, 2 technical. Capstone.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. I also see Anne Marie has her hand up here. So go ahead, Anne Marie.
Hi, thanks. Just a real quick question. The technical courses, can they be a semester length course or do they have to be in a full year course?
They need to be the equivalent of a full year course, however that works at your school.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. And again, we're going to reserve some time for Q&A. And so please, like if there are questions related to something specific that we say, please interrupt, but sort of we'll open it up for questions and make sure we leave plenty of time for that. We introduced a bunch of resources earlier, a little while ago. And so we sort of have 2 resources in particular to iterate or to reiterate for you all that we think will be helpful, and then introduce you to one new one. So the reflection tool that we talked about earlier and the self-assessment tool that we reviewed can be really helpful in the early planning stages. And so we just sort of offer that out there as you're having sort of vision, larger sort of big thinking, what do we want this to be when it grows up kind of conversations as you're putting the applications together. Those tools can be really, really helpful in your planning. So the new tool that I want to introduce is the criteria planning tool, the Part A planning tool. And I think on the next slide, yes, I've got a screenshot of it here, and I'll drop the link in the chat. Or Jennifer, if you have that handy.
Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to.
Thank you. So this particular tool was developed as a planning tool intended to support your team as you're applying for innovation pathway designation. So like a lot of our other tools, it's organized by the guiding principles. And it's connected and lists each individual indicator that applicants are responsible for addressing in the Part A application. So essentially, this can act as your checklist document to ensure that you have all of the components you need to successfully complete the app, to address everything successfully within the application. And so it can be pulled out in your team meetings to really sort of check in on where you are with each indicator and the application requirements. It can also sort of serve as a self-evaluation tool about readiness. So if you sort of go through this and say like, oh, we've only got about half of what needs to be here, maybe we wait another year to apply when we feel like we've got a really strong base for some of these pieces. And under each of the guiding principles, there's a table. So the screenshot on the screen here shows what that table sort of looks like as you see each of the indicators listed there. But sort of there's also a place for you to sort of address any sort of specific pieces, right? So there on the right-hand side, you see where you can check like not started, in progress, or complete. There's also a place for you to reflect on tasks, action items, and next steps that are related to any one of those particular guiding principles. So when you open the link to that and see it looks lengthy, but it's really designed to make sure that you haven't missed any necessary components for your planning or for completion of the Part A application. It's also worth noting that the same tool exists for Part B, and that is aptly named the Part B criteria planning tool. So we have the Part A criteria planning tool and Part B, and so both of those are there. They look the same, but the criteria is differentiated between what we'll be asking for Part A and what we ask for Part B. And thanks so much, Jennifer, for getting that link and putting that in the chat. Appreciate that.
No worries.
I actually, in the interest of time, I want to reserve as much time as possible for your questions. So I'm going to skip these next 2 slides and we can come back to them at the end, sort of if we have time after Q&A. But sort of like quickly, this was just a chance for you to open up that criteria planning tool and take a look and sort of do some reflecting. So certainly that's something you do on your own, or again, if we sort of have answered all the questions we need to at the end, we can come back to this. So I'll skip these 2 slides. I'm going to go through a couple of slides around the application process itself and some expectations, and then we'll sort of jump to your questions. So this graphic here shares an overview of the timeline for applying for designation this year. So the process began, as you are all well aware, last year and over the summer. So you submitted your intent to apply earlier in the school year. We offered some support opportunities over the summer. And as I'm sure you're all very aware, the applications are due at the end of the month on October 29th. And so successful Part A applicants will then be invited to apply for Part B, and those Part B applications will be due February 10th of 2022. And so we will have a webinar dedicated to supporting you completing the Part B application on December 2nd. So keep an eye out for information and registration coming soon. The registration is not available yet, but it will be very soon, and you'll get an email in your inbox about that. But you can also head to our technical assistance website to be able to find those registrations and that information. So it's just a heads up, that will be another sort of support opportunity we offer to the group who's in the application process. And then all designations will be conferred in early spring of 2022. So somewhere around the March, April timeline. And then schools who receive the designation this upcoming spring are expected to begin enrolling students in the pathway program next fall. So next September, your pathway programs will be up and running. Students will be enrolled and taking the first sort of series of courses.
Ali, can I just ask a question?
Please do.
Hi, can you go back to that slide? Where the ridiculously early guests at the party? And I think we'll be looking at spring 2022.
Yeah.
Is it fair to assume that this is the timeline that is going to transpose to the year after?
That's fair, Chris. Hi.
Hi, how
Good
you
to hear
doing?
your voice. Good to talk to you.
So you can put our mayonnaise and potato on the side for the other food to arrive, okay?
Perfect, will do.
All right.
I love that you're early to the party.
There you go.
All the better.
I don't know. They're really annoying, those people. So sorry about that.
No, you get dibs on all the good stuff.
Absolutely. And we've had folks join us who sort of full last year for a slate of technical assistance activities, joined in the PLCs, but weren't applying until this year. And I expect the same, like there are a lot of components to put in place as part of planning and then getting ready to launch and implement a pathway program. And so that takes time, and some people decide, they want to go after it right away and they've got the capacity and the resources to do it. And others say, we're going to pilot some things first. We're not quite ready to apply for designation yet. We're going to sort of see how some things work out, do some extended planning, and take an extra year to do that. And both are great. And the nice part about this network is that we are here to help support those conversations no matter where you are in the process. So Chris, glad to have you here. We encourage you to keep coming and participating, and sort of based on sort of where you are in the process and when you're ready to apply, that's great. That it's all great, and all are welcome here.
Good, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So quickly, a couple of notes about the application process. So as we mentioned, sort of the two-part process that's structured around the guiding principles. So the Part A applications, again, are due October 29th. After submission, Part A applications will be reviewed by DESE staff, and then successful Part A applicants will then be invited to submit a Part B. Part B applications are then due in February 10th of 2022, and all of those applications will be submitted electronically, and applicants will be invited to a brief interview process after Part B applications are submitted. And so really this is a chance to get to, for the review team to get to know you, get to know your program, and clarify any parts of the application or questions. It is low stakes, nothing to be nervous about, but really a chance for the team to get to know you, ask clarifying questions. There are some things that just can't come across in writing. And so we'd like to get the chance to talk with you all about your program and your vision for the work. Again, it's expected that the application is a joint application between the school or district, your local workforce partners, your MassHire board, and at least one employer. And then there is a team of folks at DESE who will be reviewing applications both for Part A and Part B, and they'll share their recommendations with the commissioner, but ultimately the commissioner will make final determinations for innovation pathway designation. Jennifer, anything to add here?
Actually, if you saw me on my phone, it was because I was texting with Bob LePage. Many of you know him. He is the Assistant Secretary for Career Education at the Executive Office. And I asked about the skills capital, if he had an early sense, and he said it's going to be 15 million with the RFP posted in late January with the award in May. And those will again be fiscal $23, so accessible to you after July 1, 2022.
So great
Well,
point.
that's good news.
Pathways programs are eligible for those funds. And so we'll certainly keep you updated. You'll get emails from Jennifer and I about those dates as they're posted, but good to keep in mind that that's a potential funding source that you might use for launching your pathway programs or to support your launching of pathway programs around particularly equipment. Is that right? It's centered around equipment?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just plop that in the chat. Yeah, capital expenses, people often request equipment.
Yeah, excellent.
Or money for equipment, that is.
Great. Excellent. And then sort of just a couple more slides for me, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So when you receive designation, there are several sort of post-designation commitments, and we like to just sort of put those out up front and remind folks that programs that are awarded designation this year will be required to start scheduling students in the spring. So it's a pretty quick turnaround from when you are awarded designation to start recruiting and getting students to sign up for those classes. And designation terms last 5 years. So during that time, program leads are responsible for annual reporting, meeting annual performance metrics, participating and hosting site visits, although we're not able to do it in person currently. We are doing those sort of virtually this year, and we're calling them our program spotlights. So that's part of a responsibility to share your learning along the way. And then participating in a review after 3 years of initial designation. And so as a member of the Innovation Pathways Community of Practice, which you are all now that you're here, you're on our list and you'll continue to get information from us, there's ongoing support and technical assistance available. And so there's regular convenings, professional learning, TA events that are hosted by DESE, by CCE, by the combination and other Innovation Pathways designees to support you in the process. I think my next slide talks about that. That's right. And so we're here to help you and support you. And so we want to make sure that you feel as supported as possible in this process and get your questions answered. And so sort of a couple of things to just note. We have office hours next Monday on the 18th. Those are virtual. You can schedule a 30-minute time block with us. I think we still have a couple of slots open, so take a look at that. But if those times don't work for you, shoot us an email. We can figure out a time to schedule with you to talk through some pieces if you're interested. And then always feel free to reach out to Jennifer or I. And then in addition to this workshop, there'll be 2 more what we call Design Institute workshops this year. So there'll be one in January, really focused on equity and thinking about designing for equity within your program. And then there'll be a 3rd workshop in March, which the topic is to be determined. And if you look through our list of sort of save the dates on the technical assistance website, you'll see that after the fall, many topics are just listed as to be determined, and that's on purpose, right? We really want to make sure we're being responsive to the needs and what you all are asking for. And so we don't plan out our topics for the year because we want to make sure that they're relevant and they're timely and they're giving you the information you need when you need it. And so we sort of send out updates often about what's coming up, how you can apply, how you can register, and some other supports. And so also of note that PLCs are still open for sign up. And so we'll have PLCs this year that meet once a month. And so the signups are still open for that. And we anticipate sort of starting those off in the beginning of November of this year. And then again, there'll be planning webinars, site visits, or those online, those virtual program spotlights and other supports throughout the year. So with that said, we have, and just check my timing here, I think a little over 10 minutes, just about 10 minutes to talk through. And so curious if what's coming up for you in terms of questions related to part A. They can be logistics, they can be adaptive challenges, like no question is too big or too small. So what's coming up for you? What are you wondering about related to part A? I'm gonna stop sharing screen so we can all see one another. Oh, Tara, can you tell us a little bit about the letter of intent?
Okay, so Tara, you guys submitted a planning grant application, so we know that you're planning to apply it. So we don't have to worry about that part. Hopefully that helps.
That's right. So if your school or district applied for a planning grant, that serves as your intent to apply, your letter of intent. And so we sort of require one or the other ahead of the Part A application, just so that we know sort of who's in the pipeline. Thanks, Jennifer. I just shared the contact information for the Skills Capital grant.
I have a question. We are just wondering, I think some questions have come up around like what can count as one of our technical courses. And so I don't know the best way to like, no, I mean, I think we've been asking like, okay, could we have like a lab science, like biology count, as long as it's not one of the 3 like lab sciences for the Mass Core, or as well as like, I don't know, I feel like there's like all these different options. I don't know if there's like a list that I can go to or some way to kind of better understand what those options are.
Jennifer, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I guess we don't necessarily have a list. You could certainly poke around. So there's the list of the designated programs, and many of the programs have their programs of study posted on their website. If you wanted to kind of poke around to see, or if you want to just maybe schedule some time for us to talk and we can noodle through it together.
I have a question. So we're working to develop our community partners. And so with part A being due on the 29th, like how firm of a commitment do you need from our community partners? We've reached out, but we're still in the works of, meeting with them and things like that.
Yeah, so for part A, the most important partner, and I know that you're connected and working with them, is your MassHire partner. So really, if you have that in place, and you can reference maybe conversations you have or sort of the status of where you are with the community partnerships or, the employer partners that you'll be tapping, you'll be in good shape for part A.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's right. And so Jennifer, correct me if this is wrong, but the MOUs that we'll look for will be part B applications. We'll be looking for those solid MOUs for part B, but part A, to your point, we'll be looking for sort of that connection with MassHire and then and status on where you are in your conversations with your partners.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Yeah, don't sweat the MOU at this point.
Yeah, that's helpful, because I know that last time we went through the application process, that first letter for part A was just between MassHire and the school district. And this time it kind of referenced that it was looking or hoping to have that business partner as part of that.
Yeah, just sort of to let us know that you're thinking about, like that you're entertaining that as part of the process.
Okay, so if we have, because we have a number of plans in play similar to one of the other applicants, but until you have that advisory board kind of put together. All right, that's excellent. Thank you for answering that question. It's wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome. And I want to make sure that you saw my saw what I put in the chat about Skills Capital. I think that I'm not sure when they're going to post the grant, so you'll hear actually about your Innovation Pathways designation. We'll confer them in March. So maybe the RFP is posted in January. It'll be out there. You may know at the time of submission whether or not you have it, but certainly in your Skills Capital grant proposal, you can talk about how the Skills Capital award would support your designated innovation pathway when you get to that point.
So they wouldn't necessarily decline
the
grant if it wasn't
conferred at the time of your submission.
Okay. But we would have to write it from the max 75,000
perspective standpoint. Yeah, we are hopeful to have a designation and.
Okay, perfect. Havel had another question, so looking at the number of courses, right? If you're looking for full year and not half year, so at minimum, you're looking for 4 full year courses and a half year or 100-hour immersion. Correct?
Could you repeat that? Sorry, about the half year.
So for the 2 and 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for full year courses. So you're looking for
the equivalent of full year. Yes.
4 full year
courses. Correct.
And then on top of that 100-hour either internship or capstone.
That's correct.
All right. So
courses shouldn't double dip, if that makes sense. They're 4 distinct courses.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course. And I know
Just
that Joanne has
follow-up
a
on that.
question.
Oh, sorry.
Sure. Oh, no, Kevin. Yeah, while we're on the same topic.
So since just piggybacking on my colleague from Haverhill, Victoria, so is it possible for any of those 4 courses, for 2 of those 4 courses to occur in the same year? For example, 2 courses in the junior year, because I'm trying to figure out how we navigate through all of the scheduling pressures that we have in our school. As you know, Haverhill is also in early college, designated programs. So there are a lot of things really swirling around and a lot of pressures on trying to find a schedule that suits all students and all the great things that they want to do.
Those courses can take place in the same year.
Okay. Okay. And can I just ask you one last question on the same topic? I see the value of including some AP courses, but considering that we're also trying to provide as wide access to students of as many abilities as possible, some of our Ls and students with disabilities may not be successful in an AP course. So would you have a suggestion on another type of level or focus of a course, that we could include in our 2+2 sequence here that would be able to then support students of more diverse academic abilities?
And to give some background there, we're focusing on Project Lead the Way courses, at minimum 3 Project Lead the Way courses to give you.
Yeah, so there's a list of, in fact, I'll have to pull up the link, but a list of advanced courses. So that Desi has curated. So I can provide the link to that, and that you can choose some from there. So that Joanne had the same question, and Joanne had another question, I think, before. Project Lead the Way School Engineering, Manufacturing, and Biomed can an identified path include 3 Project Lead the Way courses and 1 AP, as are 2 technical and 2 college level? The answer is yes. Oh, and you're welcome, Kevin.
So really, I want to share a resource that's related. I'm sharing the link to the actual recording, but the resources.
Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon.
My background.
Innovation Pathways.
Weird when you hear your own voice.
Here we go. I pulled up the link so I could send you the YouTube link, and it started playing my voice in the background. But so we did a webinar last fall around supporting students with disabilities and English language learners, particularly in work-based learning experiences. But we also talked about sort of access and support through advanced courses as part of that webinar. And so offer that as a resource that you might want to go back to take a look. I'm seeing, oh, we've got 60 seconds left. And so I offer that as a place. And our event resources page on the website has an archive of all of our old events. And so you can always go back to there to see the slides, listen to the recording, see what resources were shared. And then the resources from today's webinar will be shared there as well. We've got 35 seconds before folks come back and join us in this space. Any last quick burning questions? Or please feel free to reach out to us. So you have Jennifer's email, my email, you'll get a follow-up from us. So please feel free. We can always schedule some time to talk through what questions are coming up for you. Great. We hope that this was helpful. Here's my timer, and I see that folks are coming back.
And Allison is here. Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, we should see in about 5 seconds, folks will be coming back and joining us. So we really appreciate your time and your questions. Great questions, and exactly the right questions, the questions you should be asking at this stage in the process.
Yes, thank you all.
We would expect to hear at this stage in the process. So welcome back. I think everyone's back with us and has joined. We hope that your conversations were helpful, that you were able to make some connections, that you got some questions answered, that it sparked some problem solving and some solutions and some next steps for you all within your schools. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dawn to bring us home.
All right. Thank you, Callie. I hope the breakout rooms again were really fruitful for everyone. I know in my space, we kind of jumped around between the challenge and the root causes, and then trying to talk about and share some of the solutions. One big thing is knowing that you might be able to connect across communities, and just want to encourage folks to do that. So what we want to do coming out of the rooms is ask you to share something in the chat that resonated with you, or as a takeaway from your breakout space. So let's just take a moment and ask everyone to share something in the chat that you're taking away from that conversation? While you're doing that, I will as well mention that Laura is going to share in the chat a link to our registration page with a list of events that we have coming up in the coming months and over the course of the year. You can see here on the slide that we have a list of the things that are going to be coming up, and we want to encourage you to open that link now, keep it open so that when you have a chance to come back to that tab, you can take a look at what's there and consider signing up for some of the upcoming sessions. Knowing that we want to move ahead and let all of you go as quickly as possible, we also wanted to encourage you to complete our survey. So we're going to drop the link for the survey also in the chat. And again, if you don't have time now, if you can open that tab and give us some feedback sometime over the course of the day, we really appreciate the feedback. We'll use it to inform our future sessions and our next opportunities to meet with all of you.
Yeah, Don, I'm going to quickly interrupt and have Jennifer. I think there were some questions that popped up around Chapter 74 and innovation pathways in some of the breakout spaces and in our group as well. And so wanted to give a chance to address that in our last couple of seconds while folks are maybe pulling up some other links. They can listen into that.
Right. I want to be very, very clear that innovation pathways is distinct and apart from Chapter 74. They're very critical differences. If you are looking to create a program that is very narrowly focused on occupation, our traditional career vocational technical education programs, that's where you would look to Chapter 74. That's a whole other process. There's a different funding structure for this. Innovation pathways are in our comprehensive and academic high schools. They're to be broad industry sector based. So with the student progressing, like as we were saying, through that coherent scope and sequence of courses, to get to the orientation to all of the potential occupations that exist within industry, the students aren't necessarily going on to work in a particular occupation upon completion of an innovation pathway. They should understand what their trajectory is, what they would need to work in the industry, be it industry recognized credentials, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, what have you. But these are two very distinct programs. And if there's any confusion that exists around innovation pathways and what they are and what they aren't, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to set up a one-on-one. We'll get a group together to talk. But yeah, please. Yep, they're very distinct.
Thanks so much for that clarification, Jennifer. And Don, sorry to interrupt there. Yeah.
So I think we're at the end, Callie?
That's right.
Yep.
We are. So thank you so much for everyone for being here. So Jennifer's email and my email are listed on the screen here, but you'll also receive a follow-up email from us. So if there's any questions, please reach out, let us know. We'll be sharing the webinar recording, the slides, the resource guide, and any of the other resources that we talked about today in the resources page, the event resources page of our technical assistance website. So you can always check back there for archived information. The nice part about being fully virtual is that we can record and everything and have those resources available to you. So if you could, please make sure to fill out the survey. We use that information so that we know what you want to talk about next time. How did we do? How to design our next workshops? What's most helpful to you? And we really do look at each and every one of those responses to inform our decisions for upcoming events and how we design them. And also, Laura also shared, thanks Laura, about the reminder for upcoming registration. So our November and December events, you'll be able to register for those in the next week. We'll have those links up. We'll send you an email as well, so you'll know that those are up and ready to register for upcoming November and December events.